Let's just jump right into this explainer because today we are going to completely rethink human behavior. I mean, think about it. Have you ever excused a friend's terrible habit by saying, well, that's just how they are? Or maybe you've looked at the news and wondered why we do the things we do. If so, you are definitely in the right place. We are going to challenge the classic excuses we make for society's flaws, using some truly fascinating source material that takes our standard understanding of human psychology and literally flips it right on its head.
We hear it all the time, don't we? Somebody does something incredibly selfish, or a group acts aggressively, and we just kind of shrug and say, well, it's just human nature. What can you do? But our source material completely dismantles this idea. It argues that this so-called human nature is actually a total myth. Humans don't possess a fixed universal nature at all. There's no pre-programmed human essence making us inherently greedy, or inherently kind, or inherently anything, really.
So to unpack this, we're going to follow a clear roadmap. We'll hit 5 key points. First, the human nature myth. Second, the empty container theory. Third, filling our capacities. Fourth, Plato and basic needs. And finally, designing a better society.
Okay, starting with part 1, the human nature myth and debunking essentialism.
Now, the old way of thinking is what we call essentialism. That's the idea that we're born pre-programmed, like a computer hardwired with unchangeable software. But our source strongly argues we've got to completely abandon this idea. Instead, we need to view human behavior as capacities. To make this super simple, think of a capacity like a brand new smartphone, right out of the box. It has absolutely 0 apps installed on it. We aren't born with the apps, we're just born with the capacity to download them. We arrive essentially as open containers, waiting to be shaped, filled, and structured by our circumstances.
Moving right along to part 2, the empty container theory. Action, reaction, and environment.
So if we aren't born with a fixed nature, how exactly do those apps get downloaded? Well, the source explains that the absolute most fundamental way we learn is experiential. Think about a toddler for a second. You could sit there and explain the complex physics of heat to a kid all day long, but the lesson doesn't actually stick until they experience it, right? When a child touches a hot stove and instinctively pulls their hand back, their environment just provided an immediate reaction. Action, reaction, adjustment. That feedback loop is exactly how our entire internal operating system is built. The lesson is embodied. What we learn depends entirely on the reactions our specific environment gives us. That brings us to part 3, filling our capacities. What actually goes into the container? Think about how we get filled up over our lifetimes. It's like a giant puzzle. Take language and thought, for example. We're born with the capacity for language, sure, but the specific language we end up speaking is poured into us by our family and early exposure. Or what about our ethics? How we judge right from wrong is a container filled entirely by the moral frameworks, culture, and power dynamics around us. Even our aesthetics, our sense of what is beautiful, is poured in by media, art, and social tradition. And yes, even our emotions are shaped by social conditioning. Just like water taking the exact shape of the glass you pour it into, our minds take the exact shape of our environment. The content of who we are is entirely provided by our material and social surroundings. But wow, here is where we have to be incredibly careful. Just as you can pour fresh, clean water into a glass, you can also pour in poison. The source highlights several toxic inputs that can fill our emotional containers. Take nationalism. It can literally train an individual to feel absolutely nothing when another nation is destroyed. Racism numbs empathy toward other groups. Sexism completely erases sensitivity to oppression. And having a parochial, narrow worldview just restricts your concern to your own tiny circle, making outsiders practically invisible. So the big takeaway here? Emotional emptiness or cruelty isn't natural. People are not born evil. If you pour toxic materials into a person's emotional container, you're actively cultivating a lack of empathy. It's like planting a seed in poisoned soil. You really can't blame the seed when it grows up distorted. All right, part 4, Plato and basic needs. Let's look at the architectural blueprint for all of this.
Because here's the thing, you cannot successfully fill an intellectual or emotional container if the floor it sits on is completely caving in. To explain this, the text borrows a brilliant framework from the ancient philosopher Plato, his tripartite theory of the soul. Think of this like building a house. You obviously can't build the roof before you pour the foundation. Step 1 is the appetitive part. That's your basic survival, hunger and thirst. Step 2 is the spirited part, which is our deep emotional need for dignity, belonging, and respect. And finally, step 3 is the rational part, the pursuit of truth, knowledge, and wisdom. The rule here is a strict progression. Physiological needs absolutely must be met first, followed by emotional needs, before the rational, logical part of a human being can ever truly emerge.
This leads to a massive paradigm shift. Listen to this. Reason cannot flourish in a starving body or a humiliated existence. It just can't. It means that if someone is trapped fighting for their basic survival down in step 1, dealing with chronic hunger or extreme poverty, they cannot access step 3. When people in those desperate conditions resort to crime, those aren't moral failures. They are the predictable mathematical outcomes of deprivation. I mean, if someone is literally drowning in the ocean of basic survival, you can't exactly expect them to gracefully solve an algebra problem, right?
Which brings us to our final section, Part 5, Designing a Better Society, the Irreducible Minimums. So if humans are entirely the products of their environments, how on earth do we ethically structure a society? Well, a legitimate society requires what's called an irreducible minimum. Think of this as the non-negotiable sunlight and water that a plant desperately needs to survive. It means universal access to basic physical and social needs. These things aren't luxuries, they aren't handouts. They are the required baseline soil for good humans to actually bloom.
So what does that infrastructure actually look like in the real world? Well, it means establishing systems like community kitchens to guarantee free access to food. It means universal healthcare to ensure an equal right to life for everybody. It means truly equal education, not just free, but actually equal, because unequal education just reproduces the same old inequality. And it means treating housing as a fundamental human right rather than just a commodity to be bought and sold. A society that actively denies these basic conditions, while simultaneously lecturing its citizens on morality or punishing them for crimes of desperation, is honestly engaging in massive self-deception and hypocrisy.
It all boils down to this, and I absolutely love this takeaway from the text. A better society is not built by lecturing individuals, but by transforming the conditions that fill these human capacities in the first place. We have got to stop pointing fingers at fixed moral abstractions. We need to stop blaming this mythical human nature and start cleaning the water before we pour it into the glass. Which leaves us with this final, crucial thought. Since we now know we are all born as open, empty capacities waiting to be shaped by the world around us, we have to take a hard look in the mirror. What kind of environment are we building for each other? What exactly are we pouring into the containers of tomorrow? It's a hugely powerful question, and the answer is entirely up to us. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope this completely changes how you look at the people around you.